Our next speaker is Jim Crosby. Dr. Jim Crosby is a retired police lieutenant and has professionally trained dogs, taught individual and group obedience classes, and addressed canine behaviour problems since 1999. Jim first obtained his Certified Professional Dog Trainer certification in 2008 and became a Certified Behaviour Consultant Canine Knowledge Assessed in 2016. Jim is also a certified dog behaviour consultant and holds a Master of Science degree in veterinary forensic medicine, specialising in veterinary forensics, as well as a PhD in veterinary medical science from the College of Vet Medicine at the University of Florida. Jim is recognised in and out of court as an expert internationally and across the US on dangerous dogs, canine aggression, fatal dog attacks, and related issues. He has assisted on scene the ACT government and federal police during a fatal attack investigation within the ACT in 2017, and his work on dog bite-related human fatalities has been the first that has looked at these worst-case bite incidents from a physical and behavioural perspective that includes analysis of evidence and both dog and human actions and behaviours that result in human death. So we now welcome Jim Crosby discussing what is and isn't aggression in domestic dogs.
Thanks for that wonderful intro. I'd like to thank AIAM for having me down here to Australia again in Amherst. And I'd also like to acknowledge and thank the Indigenous guardians of this wonderful country and all of their elders and decision makers, past, present, and future. I would also like to mention that today's talk is not really going to go there, but as we look at the serious and fatal attacks, some of the photographic images are going to be a bit shocking to some folks. Some of those images also involve photographic evidence from fatalities. So the people, although I have done everything I can to anonymize this, any of the victims, these are deceased people that I treat with respect and acknowledge their losses. But for those of you who might be sensitive to that, this is largely about forensics and the worst of worst cases, and so those are included. Today we're talking about something we hear about a lot, and that's aggression. Dog aggression. There's aggression all over the place. People are worried about it. Aggressive dogs, this, that, and the other thing. But one of the things we've not done in the past is looked at what exactly is aggression, especially when it comes to domestic dogs. Well, aggression is behavior. To set the stage, I want to just very quickly explain what behavior is, and it's nothing special. It's nothing that's particularly esoteric or hard to understand. Everybody in here right now is doing behavior, whether you're sitting here listening or you're checking your email or you're thinking, I want to paint the bathroom pink. Everybody is showing behavior. Behavior is how we infect our environment and also how we interact with other people, our conspecifics. Behaviors exist because they meet needs and they help us meet needs. A behavior that occurs and persists only does that for one reason. It works. If the behavior doesn't work, we tend to have what is called fading and extinction, and hopefully if it doesn't work, it doesn't pop up again later. Aggression and other behaviors go by a very simple set of basically topics. You have the antecedent, and this is very convenient because it's ABC and we're all used to dealing with that. But antecedents, that's a fancy word for what happened before the incident we're looking at. Behavior is nothing more than what the organism did, and the C is consequences. How did the incident pay off for that particular organism in time and space and so forth. Did it pay off? Was the payoff good or was the payoff bad? So we put a poll up, and I'm not sure where we have the, okay, here we go. We have the results, and yes, you guys did wonderful because we're all animal people and we have good sense. But when we talk to the public, we get a lot of input. You know, what is aggression? Well, it's inherent vicious tendencies. These particular animals that meet whatever this description is, they were born bad and they stay bad and they'll be forever bad, and all we can hope to do is control them. Well, baloney. Aggression is inexcusable and irreparable in dogs. Two related questions, but it's neither. It's neither inexcusable, because if a dog is doing something that it needs to use a range of behaviors that we call aggression, then that's not bad. It's not counterproductive for the animal. It's not always bad behavior. Now, there are some arguments about aggression being caused by dietary factors and so forth. Yeah, it doesn't matter. The biggest thing you'll find with diet and aggression, like when I got in yesterday morning from Dublin, Ireland, having flown, I was hungry and I was tired. So my dietary situation of being hungry combined with the tiredness made me pretty aggressive when I hit the ground here. Yes, aggression is nothing more or less than one group of many other potential behaviors. So let's define aggression, at least in working terms. And I'm one for boiling things down. I'm a retired police lieutenant, and I'm a very functional person. I'm not personally functional, but worried about how things work. There are times I'm dysfunctional. My family puts the fun in dysfunctional, actually. But I look at how to define things not in an abstract academic way, but in what we do day to day and how it fits in. In the past, we've defined aggression based on human baggage, actually, for instance, behavior that was carried out with the proximate intent to cause harm. Well, that sounds great and wonderful unless you're applying that to something other than a human, because I don't believe that our dogs and cats and livestock and everything else, they have purposes, but I don't believe they carry around the horrible baggage, emotional and moral, that we do, and can therefore go out and try to do something deliberately evil. That just doesn't apply. We also don't want our dogs to show aggression because it, if you will, violates the norm. It's different than what we want. However, aggression is something that exists because it works in certain circumstances. Aggressive displays and aggressive actions work in helping the animal deal with its environment, its conspecifics, the challenges of survival. So for me, based on my research and also some others, for instance, Dr. Danny Mills at the University of Lincoln in the UK, we look at aggression being a means of affecting an animal's environment and its relationships with its conspecifics and with other creatures. It is always best defined as being within a particular context. If one of us is threatened by someone coming at us with a weapon in their hand and we respond in a certain way, in that context, that behavior is really not such a bad thing. However, if we show the same behavior when someone is just sitting next to us at the dinner table, that context now changes the place in our lives and in what's going on based on that context. To me, aggression in dogs is a group it's a cluster of behaviors that may individually not be aggressive, but are individually have specific meanings. And when those behaviors are brought together, that total picture and context becomes a group of behaviors that the animal uses to exist and coexist. It's best viewed for me in a functional way as being separate from human morals, human emotions, human drives. A lot of people perceive aggression as being mean or dangerous. They look at killing as being aggressive. Well, okay, but that's only part of the picture, because an aggressive display or aggressive action makes sense to the animal that's involved. If a dog bites something or somebody, that bite made sense at that time, in that place, and under those circumstances. There was a reason for it. And part of what we as animal control and animal services people who deal with bite situations need to look for is, how did that behavior make sense to that organism in that place? When we talk about aggressive behavior, we need to get better on our terms. You can see on the right the terms we see in the press and everything else on how, oh, they're attacks and they're dangerous. And right now there's craziness going on in the UK with the supposed XL bully issues. And those wonderful literary and educated publications like The Mirror and the Daily Mail are wonderful at talking about the horror, terrible, evil werewolf dog vampire attack that happened on whoever it was. So when we're referring to bites, and we're going to get more into this in my future sessions, we want to use more precise language so we're being clear. So to boil it down, aggression is a cluster of species-specific behaviors that help defend against threats, establish access to resources, or affect social standing. You want to see some true aggressive displays? Turn on the American TV, The Real Housewives of whatever. That is conspecific aggression that definitely goes beyond anything I believe that our dogs ever do. But aggression is not a disorder that needs a cure. It is part of normal behavior. Not necessarily the housewife level stuff, but it's not something that needs to be fixed. It's something we need to understand, and we need to be able to use that understanding to dig down to the root causes of why that animal feels that that behavior makes sense at that moment in time and circumstances. Aggression can be a problem-solving tool. So what does it do? Well, it helps animals, like I said, affect their environment, affect their conspecifics, affect others, and it's behavior that works. So that an animal that learns to use part of or all of the aggressive cluster of behaviors to accomplish a goal has had that behavior reinforced or rewarded. And as such, that behavior, if it continues to be successful, winds up being more and more likely to recur and become the default behaviors. So part of dealing with aggression in pets, in our dogs and cats, and I don't do too much with cats, but especially with our dogs, part of dealing with that is figuring out why this animal has felt that this worked. So why do we say a dog's aggressive? Well, there's cues and signals that I'm convinced that all dogs give off There are a few mentally ill dogs out there that don't give those signals, just like there are a few serial killers out there in the human world and sociopaths. I think the percentage of dogs is probably much smaller, but one of the things we need to educate the public, and we also need to educate our own staff and people dealing with these dogs, is looking for those cues and signals. I have yet to see a case where there were no warnings, where the dog just snapped. No. The problem is that the humans involved too often do not see those signals. I swear that to dogs, we're their slow, special relatives because they're talking to us all the time. We're just either too slow to pick it up, or we're not listening, or we don't understand the language. And the language is something we're going to talk about in another session. When we look at dog bites and when we're doing assessments and evaluations of behaviors, those of us in the field know that assessments and evaluations are fraught with all kinds of difficulties. One of the responses is, well, we'll just stop doing them. Okay, but we still have issues. When we're looking at biting animals, we need to look into what's going on behind that bite. Will a dog bite? Heck yeah, all of them will. Why? Because they've got teeth. And their teeth are their primary tool. They manipulate things with them, they move things, they eat, they defend themselves. So sure, excuse me. Can a dog bite? Will a dog bite? In the right circumstances, it definitely will. We as investigators looking into dog bites need to dig into the circumstances, the perceived level of threat, the responses of dogs to signals. All of these things underlie bites. Bite is not just a single whip and grab with the teeth and nothing happened before and nothing happened since. We need to get beyond that. We need to understand, and I define a bite functionally where its skin is touched and grabbed by the teeth. If the dog barks or threatens or growls, those are signals, those are communications, but that's not a bite. So what is the purpose ultimately of an aggressive display? Let's forget the human baggage that we want to put on it. What does the dog want or need to accomplish when they show part or all of the aggressive cluster of behaviors? Well, what is the purpose? Let us all start trying to put aside the idea of intent. Did the dog intend to inflict damage? Probably not, and I'm not even sure that we can really say, again, that dogs or other animals actually have intent as we as humans use that word, being based in moral and legal basis and all of the baggage that goes with us. Instead, let's all start looking at the purpose of a bite or of an aggressive display. What is the purpose? What is the functional outcome that that animal hopes to achieve or is trying to achieve to meet its needs? Well, there's a couple of real simple, basic drivers. First one being defense, fear. The dog is using that display in a proper and appropriate manner to gain usually space from a perceived threat. Does it need to be a real threat? No. It does not have to be what we think is a threat. But if that animal perceives that as a threat, there are certain behaviors it's going to try to use to get space. Why? Because the initial response of any creature, including us when we're behaviorally healthy, is you can do one of three things. You can freeze. Well, freeze only works if you haven't been seen. You can run, you can fly and get away, or you can fight. Of the three options, flight is your most common response. So when we say a dog needs space, it needs space for what? To lay out by the pool? No. It needs space to get somewhere else, to get away from the perceived threat, to get away from whatever it is that has worried it or has created a fear response. It may just be something novel, but defense and fear work to gain space from that animal to whatever is making it uncomfortable. Dogs use aggressive displays to guard resources, and remember that resources are not just food and water, but they are companionship with conspecifics, they are companionship with their people, they can be territory, they can be the source of good things that happen, it can be the dog's toy box with its favorite toys in it. Resources, and guarding those resources. To do that, one of the basic groups of behaviors that dogs can use is to show an aggressive display of some sort. Conflict resolution is also a source of aggressive display of behavior. I referred to the Real Housewives of whoever, Atlanta, Beverly Hills, Cairns, I don't know. Dogs resolve conflicts very much like humans, except more efficiently, by showing a range of behaviors that show that not only is the dog not real happy, but that it wants to resolve some kind of a social conflict with other, either with people or with conspecifics. Now, unlike what some people have said for years, your dog is not trying to be dominant to you. I hate it when people use that word. Your dog or dogs are not sitting there all day plotting to that when you show a sign of weakness, they're going to overthrow the ruling class, go for the proletariat here, and they're going to take the refrigerator because they know that you just resupplied steak and goodies down at the grocery store. But dogs do use aggressive displays to resolve social conflicts. And it's not, again, as some people have shown in the past, where they beat up on each other and they get to the point where one has pinned the other dog down, it's holding its teeth at its throat, and it's, you will submit to me or you're going to die. We've got that backwards. Most conflict resolution between dogs is basically ritual combat. One of them eventually rolls over and throws up their hands and essentially says, okay, great, do what it is you want. It's no longer worth it for me. It's no longer worth my energy and effort to bother to fight with you. I give. Do what it is. And that is usually a signal for the other dog to back off. And we'll get, in a future session, get into the appeasement and de-escalation signals and the conversation that goes back and forth. But these aggressive displays have a purpose, and conflict resolution is one of them. There are also other contributors to the likelihood of aggression, not just individual differences. And to make it clear, there are more differences between individuals in a breed or breed group than there are necessarily similarities. Individual differences can be huge. You can have, for instance, a golden retriever that just dies for you to throw the tennis ball. And then you get another golden retriever that you throw the tennis ball and the golden looks at you and says, there went your ball. You want to go get it? Individual differences are tremendous, and that's one of the reasons that trying to regulate based on perceived group identity as a breed, as a type, whatever, those things just don't work because there's way too much individual variability. One, disturbed sleep is just simply an illustration of one of the factors that can affect the likelihood of an aggressive display. Again, as I said earlier, when I came in yesterday, when I first got here, the chances of aggressive display were very high because of the sleep disturbances. Mental state has a distinct effect on the likelihood and intensity of aggressive displays. And it's easy to see the cycle that starts here. The animal starts with a certain mental state. If it's at home, that mental state may be very, very mellow, very easygoing, very confident. The dog is relaxed and so forth. Drop the dog in a shelter, in the chaotic environment with all the sights, sounds, and smells of the battlefield going on around them. Their mental state is not going to be terrific. Well, that mental state can and usually does result in some sort of a behavior to try to deal with the mental state. That behavior can be positive or negative, but whatever it is, it has consequences. Those consequences may help the dog, or ultimately they may hurt the dog, but that leads to a change in the mental state, and so forth and so on. Mental state, behavior, consequences, mental state. And if we're in the chaos of a shelter, for instance, or if they're out on the street and are not having their needs met, that cycle can feed into itself very rapidly. And suddenly you get an animal that is acting in a manner for survival that may not be the same sort of behavior that we want to see. And in testing for those possible future behaviors, sorry, it beat you. In any case, that's one of the cautions we have to look at, that cycle when we try to predict behavior in the future, especially when it's a general prediction. Is this going to be a friendly dog, or is this going to be a problem dog? Well, we'll get into that later. But to me, when we're looking at aggressive behavior, especially when we're looking at dog bites and bite issues, we want to look at the purpose of the bite and the primary action or reaction sequence. What happened? What did the dog do? And then what result did that produce? It can be various kinds. Most common dog bite is a quick engage and retreat. That way the dog is getting space. We have those bite and hold situations. That may be more of a guarding behavior, trying to retain something. We also have those dogs that I term offensive, where they are actually closing to their targets. I love, and I'm sure plenty of people have been here. I don't know what your system does, but in London, you've got that lady's voice that's always going, mind the gap, mind the gap. Well, in that situation, it means don't be stupid, don't put your foot between the oncoming train and the platform. But when we analyze dog behavior, one of the things we need to do is mind the gap. Who closed the gap between the dog and the target of the bite? Was this offensive, where the dog closed the distance, or defensive? I want to show this really quickly. I think this will come up. Oops. Let me see, can I go back one? Yes, okay.
When I heard he was coming on, I was so happy. I just adore dogs. But I'm especially happy to meet you after your story yesterday. He's a Mastiff, right?
He's a Dogo Argentine.
Okay.
So he's an Argentinian Mastiff.
Okay,
yes.
okay. You're gorgeous. You're gorgeous. Oh, I'm so glad you're okay. You too. You too. Thank goodness for you.
Yeah.
Gosh, have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Happy Valentine's Day. Oh my God.
Yeah, kind of rough.
Okay.
But
right.
In looking at that, is there anybody here that says that was out of the blue and unwarned? Yay! Everybody is on board with that. That dog was trying to express its discomfort. Now, the backstory to that was that the dog the night before, it was out in Colorado, the dog had been trapped on a frozen lake The fire department had bravely gone out there after polishing their hoses all day and saved the dog. I'm sorry, I'm an old policeman. I'm an old police officer, and as such, we harassed the firefighters all the time. We were out there doing dramatic things or doing dangerous things, and then the firemen were on the news the next day, being the ones that everybody was saying, oh, well, thank goodness our firemen were out there. Okay, you guys aren't the ones that were getting dirty and so forth. So in any case, in that case, there were plenty of warnings, and on Friday, we're going to break down that sequence into almost frame by frame, so you can see how much communication was missed. But this was a dog who'd been through a previously traumatic situation, was then thrust into a TV studio where he'd never been before, surrounded by bright lights and heat and big cameras and people and booms, and he finally had enough. And what did he do? He used his tools and he bit to gain space. Now, was that bad behavior or a behavior we don't want? Well, we may not be happy with it, but it was understandable. Would I then say, oh, that's a dangerous dog? No. The local agency over that, sorry, Denver Animal Services, wanted to declare that dog dangerous. Well, fortunately, the news anchor was a dog person, and she refused to cooperate with their process, because their rule was, if the dog bites, it's dangerous, it's gone. Oh, and if it looks like a pit bull, it's also gone. But in that case, it made sense. And that behavior made sense to the dog. Now, I'm going to have to speed up a little bit here so I don't get our fine MC here throwing at, that's why I'm saying that. Before you blame a dog for aggressive behavior, do consider health issues. I have seen way too many cases where I've been called in on bites and they said, well, nothing happened if it was for no reason. Okay, great. What happened just before the bite? Well, my little toddler went up and fell on the dog. We look at the dog and guess what? The dog's got bad hips, and that was a pain response. It wasn't in any way dangerous behavior. It was a predictable response. So one of the things when we're looking at bites is we want to consider the fact that there may be a medical cause for the behavior. Types of behavior, types of aggression. There are some books out there that break aggression into 150 different categories. There's spouse aggression, and there's maternal aggression, and there's paternal aggression, and there's diet. It's nuts. I look at it, and there's really, to me, two big kinds of behaviors that we're looking at. Conditioned aggression, that is aggressive display that we have caused and we have reinforced, or unconditioned aggression. Unconditioned aggression is something like defensive aggression. If you perceive a threat, nobody had to teach you to defend yourself. You're just going to try to stay alive. In my work for my PhD, I looked at over 500 cases of human fatalities by dog bites. And I found some very interesting things that really hadn't come up before. One of them is, and central to my research, was the idea of mediation of events, or mediation of the incidents. I found three big categories, and again, on Friday we're going to get into this in a lot of detail, but those are unmediated, which means stuff happens. In other words, for instance, I've had a fatality where somebody reached in a car, was nipped on the end of their finger, no big deal, nobody worried about it, but they were immunocompromised. And 5 days later, they died of sepsis from something called capnophagic canamorsis. It's the common bacteria that is in every dog's mouth. Dogs are actually pretty clean. Other than that, cat bites, on the other hand, get nasty because of the bacteria. But an unmediated bite incident or an unmediated fatality is something where it's an accident. The action would not have been expected to produce such a severe response. I also, and again, we're going to get into that Friday especially, but I also include redirection. The case I was pulled literally off the plane here the last time I was in Australia was a case where dog tried to bite a stranger on the property. The owner laid hands on the dog. There were a lot of other problems, but the dog eventually reached such a level of arousal and frustration that the dog turned on the owner and killed her. And that was not mediated particularly by people or anything else. There are dog-mediated incidents when, for instance, like defense, where the dog is defending themselves against perceived threat. And then the worst bunch is the human-mediated. I'm down to the 2-minute warning, yes. Human-mediated, and again, we're going to talk about that, but those are the instances where people have either encouraged human-focused aggressive display from the dog, you know, get him, get him, get him, or they have tolerated behaviors that they could have and should have recognized and done something about beforehand. So basic categories: unmediated, dog-mediated, human-mediated. You know, things can go bad all the time, and I love this picture in a shelter. This chow had just bitten this vet tech for about the 3rd time that day, and you know, some things happen. We covered this real quick. We have to, when we're talking about dog-mediated incidents, we want to look at offense versus defense, defensive aggression. One of the things I want to drill down and have drilled down on is the level of human responsibilities and how we can hold humans responsible for the actions of the animals under their control. And I'm afraid we don't have time to go on it today, but predation is something that's completely different from normal aggression. It has a purpose, it has a pattern. We want to be able to behaviorally assess not just the dog, but the incident involved. When we have a bite, we want to look for that why. We want to look for the mechanism. We want to find out how this made sense. And ultimately, I'm around to assist. I can be gotten a hold of. I'm more than happy to help agencies or individuals, whatever, with bite cases, especially these most serious cases. And at this point, I'm going to fall off the stage and say thank you very much, and we'll talk more later.